In my opinion, this whole BP disaster, oil spill in the Middle East, whatever you want to call it, the volcano of oil, the possibility that we could be seeing storms where clouds are catching on fire because lightning ignites aerosolized gasoline as a result of a hurricane in the region. All of this is evidence, is proof that objectivism and libertarianism and Republican conservatism have failed us. Alec Epstein disagrees. He's a fellow at the Ayn Rand Institute, AYNRAND.org.
As you can imagine, I don't agree with that at all. I find it interesting that no matter how large the government is, no matter how many regulations there are, no matter how many agencies exist, that I, as a believer in the consistent implementation of individual rights, completely free markets, no matter how much of that exists, every time something goes wrong, the conventional liberal or socialist or statist refrain is, well, it's because we didn't have enough regulations, or it's because of those, because of those free marketers. Well, we can pick one or the other industry, whichever one you want, but in all of these cases, these are massively regulated industries, and the problems in those industries can be traced precisely to those kinds of interference. So
let's pick oil, for example. In Norway and in Brazil, they require that a blowout preventer be put on the top of an undershore well, and this all followed the Ixtax blowout back in 1979, that a blowout preventer be put on that can be acoustically activated by a ship on the surface if the rig itself goes down and if everything else fails. It's a secondary fail-safe mechanism. They require that, and they haven't had blowout problems since then. In Canada, they require, if you're going to drill in the environmentally sensitive areas of the north, that you, simultaneous with the main well being drilled, that you also simultaneously drill a pressure relief well, and they haven't had any problems. Why? We didn't do either one of those things. They were both examined by Dick Cheney during his energy policy stuff, and in both cases he said, it'd be too expensive, and besides that, we believe in the free market. We're going to let these companies regulate themselves. Didn't work out so well, Alex.
Yeah, so I don't regard this as an example of the free market at all. You've got the MMS, completely, arguably in bed with oil companies in certain cases.
Well, quite literally in bed in some cases.
Yeah, well, I haven't followed that aspect.
They were having sex and snorting methamphetamine and having, literally having sexual intercourse between regulators and women who had been hired by the oil companies as lobbyists.
Right. So, this is a very common thing under very regulated states. So let me just tell you.
Actually, no, it's not.
Having
sex and snorting
all the way from this. I meant sordid and corrupt behavior, and certainly, the more consistently socialist a country, namely the Soviet Union, the more corruption exists. But let me just tell you,
the Soviet Union was not a socialist country; it was a dictatorship. If you want to identify a socialist country, how about Denmark? And I don't see that much corruption going on there.
Yeah, Denmark is not a socialist country at all. It's a mixture of the free market and statism in some ways.
Okay, so when I say socialist, you mean communist?
Oh, we can get into that terminology if you want, but let me just lay out what I think the proper free market approach is to these kinds of issues like oil spills, because I think it might surprise people who aren't clear on what individual rights means as a governing principle. So individual rights as a governing principle means that you are free from the initiation of coercion, and that includes property damage by other people. And if someone is dealing with a type of property that is particularly potentially dangerous, and that could certainly be a deep sea oil rig, then you have a right to demand that it present objective evidence that it is not going to threaten you. And so,
So who's going to mediate that demand? That's what government and regulatory agencies do.
No, it's not regulatory agencies. It's courts based on evidence. So let's take two parallel scenarios. One is the deep water scenario.
No, wait a second, Alex.
Tom, do you want to know the answer? No.
Well, but you're getting ahead of yourself. You just said that you have the right to demand, before they drill, you have the right to demand evidence that they're not going to harm you. And my whole hit on objectivism is that it's remedial rather than preventative.
Right. So I don't regard it as preventative if there's a threat. So in the same way that if you have evidence that there's, your wife has hired a serial killer to kill you, you don't have to wait until there's a chalk outline to go prosecute. If you have evidence of a real threat, and that includes, a nuclear facility that doesn't seem to be taking the proper precautions. So you have to go to court, you have to take evidence, you have to say, look, these people are not taking the proper precautions, and there is real evidence that they could destroy my property.
So if I live near Vermont Yankee, I have to be a nuclear engineer, and I have to get inside Vermont Yankee, and I have to find the cracks in the containment vessel, and then I can go to court and I can ask them to stop dropping strontium-90 into my water. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, it's that like anything else, if you don't have the specific expertise, you and your neighbors can pay people. So if you've got $1 million,
so I've got to be rich to begin with.
Well, you're paying the money in taxes anyway, so it's not a matter of being rich. It's a matter of, do you pay money to competent people who will use objective evidence, or do you pay for some regulatory agency that's at the top of the news one day?
I don't have enough money, Alex, to hire somebody to check out an oil drilling rig.
If you collaborate with others, you do.
Do you think all the shrimpers in Louisiana had enough money to hire somebody to check out an oil drilling rig?
Also, it doesn't mean that you have to go inspect the thing. You have to demand, if it's a truly potentially dangerous thing, you can say, look, you need to present evidence that you've taken safety precautions where, for instance, you are capable of cleaning up an oil spill. And it's unlike the regulatory agency, which said, oh yeah, sure, BP, you say you can clean up 10 times, we believe you. No, you'd actually have to go to court and prove with real experts that you could do it. And if that had happened, likely we wouldn't have this kind of oil spill.
So you're suggesting replacing regulatory agencies with courts who will determine before the fact what the probabilities are of something happening. Do I have that right?
Well, in most cases, that's not necessary because there's not a real threat. We're talking about a specific, very narrow category of things that if something goes wrong, they're inherently very dangerous. So that would be something like, a nuclear power plant, maybe a giant.
Well, let's talk about the oil spill. Everybody knows, what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So what should have been done to prevent that? What should the citizens of Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, the United States, and those of us who are concerned about life in the oceans, since we all breathe the oxygen the oceans produce, what should we have done?
The local people, I think you would have had a completely different setup. But the basic thing is, they should have said, look, if you're drilling at these depths that have never been done before, what is your proof that you know how to, that this is safe and that you can fix, especially...
And they provide you with 5,000 pages of proof, and you look at it and you go, I'm not an oil engineer. I don't know what the,
Right, so that's why courts have experts and evidence, and it's not just a matter of what the common citizen knows. But
who pays for those experts and evidence?
Private citizens, the same people who pay for everything.
So you've got a multi-billion-dollar corporation versus a bunch of shrimpers who make $40,000 a year, and the shrimpers are paying for this expert evidence?
Yeah, why not? I mean, you have to work out exactly how it happens. The point is the existing regulatory system has failed massively, and you saying that you want it staffed with your people is not a very compelling argument.
I'm not saying it's failed.
And real evidence in courts of law. That is the proper way to adjudicate.
Okay, I get that. I'm not saying, just for the record, I'm not saying it's failed. I'm saying it was corrupted. But Alex Epstein, AynRand.org, the website, there's a link to it over at ThomHartmann.com. Alex, thanks for dropping by today.
All right, thanks, Tom.